Tonight on Nova, how to design and build a skyscraper in 4.5 years. Usable space more than the Empire State Building. Height nearly 800 feet with 47 floors. It's a tale of technology, art, and money. But above all, it's the story of the people who build it, for this is one of the world's largest handmade objects. Skyscraper.
Funding for Nova is provided by Johnson & Johnson, the signature recognized around the world for commitment to quality healthcare products for the entire family. And Lockheed, a bold new force in systems engineering, management, and technology services for defense, space, and industry. Major funding for Nova is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.
On the west side of Manhattan, a 4-acre parking lot stretches out from 8th to 9th Avenue between 49th and 50th Street. But this is a parking lot with a difference. It costs $100 million. To spend that kind of money, you have to picture a future in which this patch of asphalt becomes a new commercial and residential center, with a skyscraper called Worldwide Plaza towering above where Chevys now roam. Developer Bill Zeckendorf Jr. sees the possibilities. He buys the parking lot and then spends several $1 million more at the New York offices of Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. SOM is the nation's largest architectural firm, with broad experience in skyscraper design. The principal architect of Worldwide Plaza is David Childs.
It is a frustrating profession because unlike most of the visual arts, one does not deal in the final medium. A sculptor sculpts the sculpture and the painter paints the canvas. But in architecture, you do everything remotely. It's all done with magic, mirrors, and we build models that are supposed to look like the real thing. And we do drawings that are two-dimensional, but we are, by the trickery that Giotto taught us of perspective, we make it look like 3 dimensions. And so it's all remote.
The process of designing Worldwide Plaza begins with preliminary drawings like this one. Next, a scale model is made. With each major change in design, a new model is created. David Childs and his team also use sophisticated computer imaging to try out different ideas for the building. The relationship between Worldwide Plaza and the surrounding area can be shown as well.
What I'd like to do with this building is to have it be the perfect example of what we all imagine around the world as the great American classical skyscraper. And to do that, because it will always be seen in such a prominence from around the whole city and from New Jersey as well, I've designed this in the classical 3-part piece that all the great skyscrapers of New York have taken. And that is the base of the building, the shaft in the middle, and then the great exuberant crown, much like a column at the very top.
The total cost of the project is $550 million, almost all of which must be borrowed. About 30% of that will go for interest payments alone. But if everything goes right, it will be money well spent.
During those first 10 years, probably the return is in the 11-12% level. And then hopefully when you get beyond the 10th year, you start getting up to very substantial returns, which would be 15 to perhaps as high as 20%.
But there won't be any profits at all unless Zeckendorf and his partners convince the banks to lend them the full amount by signing up at least one major tenant before construction begins. It won't be easy. Worldwide Plaza has been planned for an area of Manhattan that's on the outer fringe of the Midtown Business District, just north of Times Square. Nevertheless, a major advertising firm, Ogilvy and Mather, decides that the future might be here for the right kind of deal. To some members of the Ogilvy board, the company and Clinton, the skyscraper's neighborhood, are not an obvious match, to say the least. In grittier times, Clinton was known as Hell's Kitchen. So the executives who want to move have to convince the ones who don't.
We literally had our management go, stand in the parking lot, and walked up and down the parking lot, looking at the buildings and trying to do exactly what we were calling the envisionary work. What would it be when that crane goes down and the building goes up? When these buildings, which had been promised to be renovated, would be renovated? When that porno theater would be sold, or would it be sold? And we spent a half an hour literally in that parking lot and huddled afterwards in the parking lot so we would soak up the neighborhood.
A couple of them walked it at night and came back and said, no, no.
That's right.
Eventually, the naysayers come around, attracted by advantages like this private lobby and a share in the building's profits. Even so, the move seems risky.
It is by far the biggest decision the company has ever made.
Yeah, or ever will make.
Or ever will make. And if we were off in any respect, it could hurt the business for 10 years.
With Ogilvy on board, the official groundbreaking ceremony takes place in the fall.
1, 2, 3.
For all the major players, the stakes are high. If David Child's design doesn't measure up, his reputation could be tarnished. If the building fails financially, Bill Zeckendorf and his partners could lose their shirts. And if it doesn't get built on time, Dominic Fonte of HRH Construction could lose his mind.
Good morning, Colin. How you doing?
As day-to-day construction manager, Fonte will oversee every detail of the project from his headquarters on the site.
We're under so much pressure. It's different from a hospital or from IBM. IBM is I consider them very starchy organization, okay? You cannot get excited, or else that's unprofessional if you get excited. You shouldn't show emotions. And here we have to show emotions. If you keep things inside, within yourself, you will very soon develop ulcers, and you will very soon realize that this business is not for you, because you cannot handle the pressure. There's a lot of pressure. You have a pressure of money, you have a pressure of time, you have a pressure of coordination. And these three working together build up this steam inside the kennel.
In November, construction finally begins, with crossed fingers all around. The first task is to clear the site, but it's not as easy as it seems. A network of cables, pipes, and sewers has lain under Manhattan for generations, and somewhere there's a city official who won't let them be touched without his or her approval. So if you want to dig them up, or move them, or replace them, you have to get a permit, or 2, or 20.
In the city of New York, you open up the street, it's like a bowl of spaghetti. There's a lot of cable, a lot of conduit, a lot of pipe. There's so many that if you call the specific agency who put the pipe down there 40, 50 years ago, first of all, they say, well, it's not mine. They don't even know if it's theirs. Second of all, if they think it's theirs, by the time they check and find out that it is theirs, it's not theirs, it will be at least another 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm dealing here with people. I mean, I'm laughing now because I think I have to laugh to keep my sanity. But it's frustrating. It's crazy.
As Fonte grapples with city officials, the architects are still trying to finalize plans for many parts of the project. Sometimes they're only a step or two ahead of the builders.
Because of the escalator above, right? That space.
Yeah, right.
We can use some space under that for storage, can't we?
Yeah, sure. Rest work. We should be able to.
A lot can happen to increase costs as drawings become reality. Inevitably, there is a close and often tense relationship between, on the one hand, the architects and the construction managers, who take no financial risk, and the developers, who take a great deal. The man Bill Zeckendorf is named to watch over his investment is Jack Schuster.
We have 1,600,000 square feet of space, roughly, round figures. Construction very often is analyzed on the basis of so much a square foot. For every dollar more than the budget, we're talking about $1,600,000. If you've made a mistake, or if you have given a low budget that is $10 less than cost, which is altogether possible in the scenario that I've painted for you, we're talking about $16 million above the budget. That's a very sizable piece of change.
We've got the building.
Communication among the team members is one of the project's biggest challenges. So they meet every 2 weeks. It's here that Jack Schuster hears the latest bad news about the budget or the schedule. Today, for example, he learns of a delay in the excavation.
As of today. Okay. The building's not finished as of today.
What are you telling me then? That the schedule is not in effect?
The sequencing is in effect. The actual dates have slipped somehow.
How much have they slipped?
Doma should be out of column line 1 for about 2 weeks.
I think you better go on record with him telling him that if anything happens from here on in, that further delays this water line because of his initial delay in starting, it's going to be his responsibility. Orestes told us all.
Orestes is worried about the fact that...
I know what Orestes is worried about. He put it in letter form. He told us that he was concerned that if push came to shove, and if we didn't start that in a hurry, the water department might wake up to the fact that we're doing it with a slight revision and hold up the whole goddamn installation.
That we're going to 20 inches instead of 30 inches.
That's exactly right. Okay? And you better go on record with Delmont telling him that their schedule, that we didn't do anything to delay, is now behind, and if anything happens with the building, with the water department, that's going to hurt us, you say, they better be prepared to be responsible for it. That's the end of the subject. Change the subject.
When the excavation is finally finished to a depth of 30 feet, the next phase of the project can begin, the building of the foundation. Because it's built on solid bedrock, Worldwide Plaza can rest on what is known as a shallow foundation. In this case, a series of concrete squares called column footings. Each footing will serve as the base of a massive steel column. Together, the footings must spread the load of the entire building across a large area. First, the concrete will be poured into these footing holes, which have been fitted with reinforcing steel rods to help the hardened concrete withstand stress. The mixture has to be just right. Too much water will weaken it. Too little will create air pockets when it hardens, thus reducing the strength of the footings. The weather and temperature can also affect it. Buildings have collapsed because of substandard concrete, so every construction site has a quality control inspector to monitor the work. The footings will harden over the next 3 weeks until they are ready to receive the first steel columns, due to arrive in May. The steel for Worldwide Plaza is being fabricated in Houston, some 1,600 miles away. A company called Mosher Steel has been working on the project for nearly 6 months. Mosher's job is to turn raw steel into 19,000 tons of fabricated steel, to customize each piece into a column, beam, or girder that will fit perfectly into the building's skeleton. The company is already fabricating steel for the 13th floor, even though back at the site, the foundation is still being laid. Typically, Mosher wants to be 5 to 6 months ahead of the construction schedule. Today, it's putting together a piece called a tree column, with a central trunk thick enough to bear a vertical load of a couple of 1,000 tons. And this is one of the branches of the tree, called a spandrel beam, which is welded to the trunk to create a permanent bond. During construction, each spandrel beam in the 2-story tall column will have to be bolted to another beam. The Mosher engineers have calculated the exact number and size of the bolts needed to withstand all of the forces that will converge on the connections when they're finally made. Although a safety factor is always built in, each engineer lives with the fear that his or her calculations could be wrong.
I always worry about collapse, very much so. Well, I know the 2 engineers in Kansas City, yes. With the Kansas City, with the Hyatt Regency. It's, in fact, I had a collapse once. I designed a beam and didn't put the proper stiffeners in, and the beam collapsed under a huge pile of gypsum. And luckily no lives were lost, but the tunnel train that burrowed underneath the gypsum certainly couldn't go through its tunnel because the tunnel height was decreased because of the beam failure. No, it's a fear, and when a structural engineer recognizes that he's got a good team behind him that's aware of public safety, aware of competency of designs, using basic laws, using the laws of God, if you will, free body diagrams, and using the principles of engineering, there's a great deal of comfort in that for all of us.
Finally, on May 14th, the first piece of steel arrives at the site from Houston. This 8-inch thick plate will rest on one of the now hardened concrete footings to provide extra strength for the base of the first steel column.
The steel comes in pre-cut and with bolt holes and nothing. There's no leeway. It can't be wrong. So when that column sits on top of that plate, and on that plate, everything is supposedly going to fit. And this has to be true for the next 800 feet.
Every step in the assembly is marked on drawings provided by Mosher. Nothing is left to chance. Now it's time to unload the first tree column, a full 20 tons of steel. Because it will stand at the base of the building, this column is one of the strongest and thickest. It will have to support a load 175 times its own weight when Worldwide Plaza is finished. The iron workers here today will stay together as a team for the next year. Soon they'll be joined by men and women from 40 different trades, up to 1,000 workers at one time. But today, the family on the site is still small and determined, with a quiet pride that outsiders might miss.
I don't know whether or not I would be able to say really whose shoes I would like to be in. There's advantages in different positions. Obviously, I would like to be in the shoes of the architect because I could say, I designed the building. It is a monument which you built for yourself. And you could say, that's my idea, okay? So yeah, I would love that. I would really love to say, that's my idea. So I would love to be in his shoes. On the other hand, I would love to be in Bill Zegendorf's shoes because I could then say, that's my building. Physically, it's my building. And it's a beautiful building. So that's some satisfaction also. So it's very difficult really to say which shoes would you want to wear. I'm very happy with the shoes I have on now. Because when I could say, they designed it, he owns it, but I built it.
By late August, Worldwide Plaza rises from its foundation. It has taken 3 months to erect the complex steel skeleton for the lower floors. At the present schedule, the steel will go up about a floor a week through the fall and winter. But the building won't be completely finished for almost 2 more years. Each day begins with a long climb of the crane operator. The height of the crane is increased as the building grows, so it's always above the topmost floor. Once in his cabin, the operator begins the task of lifting and placing the steel where it's needed. He can raise and lower the hoist or swing the crane in any direction, all with precise speed and accuracy. Accuracy here is not just a matter of efficiency, it's a matter of life and death. One mistake and tons of steel would crush anything in its path. After the operator has positioned a piece of steel, an ironworker called a connector wrestles it into place with his partner. Next, he lines up the bolt holes with a tool called a spud wrench and puts in the first bolt to hold the beams together. Later, other ironworkers put in the rest of the bolts and nuts and tighten them with an impact wrench. After the beams and columns are in place, the decking crews go to work. Corrugated steel decking is laid out across the beams to form each floor of the building. When it's covered with concrete later in the week, the decking will be able to support 50 pounds per square inch, more than enough for an office full of people and equipment. But even as construction continues, design changes are being made, creating new conflicts over how the building should look and what it will cost. A prime example is the brickwork. The building's bricks will come in 2 colors, one lighter and the other darker, with the lighter color the subject of heated debate. Given enough time, brickmakers can create virtually any color the client wants by mixing different pigments together to achieve the desired tint. This mixture can then be sprayed on the bricks before they're baked. Ironically, the promise of unlimited choice has only made the selection of color more difficult for the skyscraper's architects and developers. And for its brickmaker, a company called Glengarry.
If you're given a red brick that is a specific color, that's fine, and the architect says, well, I like that color, but maybe just a little bit lighter. Well, everybody's conception of color is different. 1, you can't remember color. 2, everybody's conception is different. And what is a little bit lighter? I have no idea. There was a point in time where we were asked to come up with a marriage of 2 colors, and that's a direct quote. I have no idea what a marriage of 2 colors are. You try to relate that to the plant and to the lab, and they laugh. I was laughing. You can't say it with a straight face. That part was difficult, and it's not only with Skidmore, Owens & Merrill, it's generally every designer in the city where they're using multiple colors.
As Glengarry prepared samples for Worldwide Plaza, the architects and developers fought over whether the light-colored bricks should be shaded pink.
One of the owners, Victor Male, likes pink, I think in the simplest terms, and he wanted a pink building. It would be a terrible mistake to make this a pink building. It is too damn big. He needed if you look at the traditional large buildings, Metropolitan Life, the Woolworth building, the buildings at Rockefeller Center, it needs to be a light building.
I'm a painter, among other things, and so I'm very color conscious, and I wanted this whole complex to look different than any other one in the city.
But David Childs, the building's architect, argued strongly that these almond-colored bricks were more appropriate.
Victor wanted a pink building, David wanted a white building. We were sort of polarized, and in the process of going through the budget confirmation, we were getting actual samples of brick. The one thing that was in our benefit financially is the fact that this pink brick that Victor liked costs a lot of money because it comes from Utah or someplace out west. A lot of trucking costs, and we can get stuff, if we can get stuff locally and thereby save the trucking costs, the price comes down, our dollar per square foot cost for the building comes down. We used that as the vehicle.
On the sidelines, Dominic Fonte had been waiting impatiently for the final compromise.
I can understand them worrying about a shade of the red brick or the darker brick, similar to this, either this color or this color here. But I find it a little ludicrous that they're worrying about this shade here versus this shade here. Okay, now to me and to my eye, these look the same. Or not the same, but close. And once you put these in, you expose this to the New York atmosphere for 3-4 months, you cannot tell them apart. And what makes this thing even more ludicrous about this color, that is that the brick starts on the 6th floor. 6th floor is about roughly 150 feet up in the air, and no pedestrian is going to tell you the difference between one brick or the other.
There are other problems as well. Construction has now fallen behind schedule because just one subcontractor has been delayed. Concrete cannot be poured on some of the lower floors until the subcontractor puts in steel barriers called deck stops to keep the concrete from flowing off the edge. Artie Nussbaum, Dominic Fonte's boss, has just about had enough.
When am I getting the men? Mr. Polito!
Joe, come here, Joe.
Let me just bring something to light. I don't want to be the camera. No. When are we getting the soldiers to put in the deck stops?
We have 20.
I don't care about the number, but they're taking 4.5 days to do a floor. It takes only 2.5 days to do a floor up above. Obviously, there's a disparagement between the two.
Running out of sync here, baby.
When are you going to give me a floor every other day in stops?
I'm back to welding capacity. I got 2 generators.
I buy 2 more generators. Charge the client for it.
One on 11.
I don't care.
You got one on 15.
Excuse me.
And you got one
Stop. If you have a client who did work out of phase, are you charging me for that generator? I bet you are. Then give me another generator upstairs.
We are. We got one upstairs, one foot down.
Bring me another one. I'm serious, guys. Bring me another generator. Where is it written I can only have 2 generators? You're getting paid. No one's asking to do it on the arm. I want a letter written.
Nussbaum is especially upset because the subcontractor was hired by one of the building's tenants, Ogilvy and Mather. O&M is supervising much of the work on its own floors, creating a logistical nightmare.
Please listen to what I'm saying. I should have poured 6. All of 6.
Should be poured up to 15 now.
Okay, so 9 floors behind. 9 floors behind, which is 2 floors a week, which is 4.5 to 5 weeks, right? I want a letter to O&M saying you owe us 5 weeks delay. He delayed the whole core and shell of this effing building 5 weeks. Please write the letter. He is not my friend. He is my enemy.
I'm telling you, we'll be back in the pattern now.
Am I miscommunicating?
The subcontractor gets the message, and the deck stops are installed. When the concrete finally arrives at the site, it's pumped up to the floors above through a series of special extension pipes. Felix Germano supervises the pour.
On a floor like this, we have at least 10 or 11 trades. We have carpenters, electricians, concrete laborers, cement finishers, masons, lathers, inspectors, surveyors, and on and on. The activity, I love it. This is what makes it all happen. We've been spending a lot of time on the floor. The concrete is the last step, covering everything. I love it. The momentum is here today.
The concrete can't be stopped once it begins to flow. It must be poured over the steel decking to a depth of 5.5 inches. Room must be left for all the pipes, wires, and ducts that travel from floor to floor. First, the concrete is leveled with a long wooden or metal bar, then smoothed repeatedly. It begins to set almost immediately. In 3 to 4 hours, it will be hard enough to walk on. As for the deck stops, they all work perfectly. Across the street at HRH Field headquarters, the project team does not stop to celebrate. A shipment of bricks for the building's exterior has not arrived at the site, as the schedule requires. In fact, the architects haven't even seen the final samples.
We have requested that the brick for our job be submitted to us, because we still have not gotten the final approved samples.
The understanding we had was that when the first kill brick came out, the architect would be invited to go over. When is that going to happen?
That's the same. That's
supposed to be now?
It's supposed to have been now. I received a call. I didn't receive a call. I called Glengarry directly and tried to plan a trip with the architects. Says when it's a good time to go. So don't bother coming now. We postponed you another 2 weeks until first week in December. I says why? He says, well, we came around the job, we looked, and we felt that we could use 2 more weeks to expedite some of our more urgent customers.
At Glengarry's Brickworks in Pennsylvania, there is no hint of the anxiety that the project team is feeling in New York. For Glengarry, Worldwide Plaza is a big job, but by no means the only job. Brickmaking proceeds at its own pace. The first step is to mine clay dust from a quarry by setting explosive charges. Brick clay is made by mixing the dust with water. The clay is extruded in a continuous rectangular bar and then cut into the extra large bricks that the architects have designed for the skyscraper's walls. Before they're baked, the bricks must also be sprayed with color. Glengarry is making nearly 1.25 million bricks for Worldwide Plaza, and 29,000 of them must be finished by hand. Over 50 different shapes have been designed by the architects to give the building its distinctive look. These bricks must first be drilled to promote even drying, and then carefully smoothed. Each special brick costs about $3, 8 times as much as an ordinary brick. At this point, the brick is still relatively soft. It now has to be hardened by drying and baking in a kiln. The kiln is about 500 feet long, and bricks take more than 2 days to travel through it. To the Glengarry managers, the Worldwide Plaza job is moving along nicely, with plenty of time to spare.
We've been in the business for a long time. Our salesmen have been in the business for a long time. We know about how fast projects go up. We knew for a fact they could not possibly require brick physically on that site so that the mason could start laying it prior to November. It was an impossibility, regardless of how many people they put on there, how fast the steel went up, or anything else. They could not use the brick faster than that.
But that's not how they see it in New York.
I don't consider it against my religion that he has the brick a week or two early, and that we put up the hoist, which we expect to start next week, and start lifting the brick to the floor. It's very hard to get a contractor going when there isn't a pile of material sitting there in front of him. What will you do if you have 100 bricklayers on the job and Glengarry screws up? Say, I'm sorry. So the contractor says, put it here. As they say in my language, took us up from tish. Bring it.
But as the weeks go by, Glengarry is proved right. It's still too early for brickwork to begin through November and into December. By Christmas, the steel has reached the 28th floor, but there are still no bricks on the site. At the HRH Christmas party, all these worries are put aside. The ever-pragmatic construction managers see the party as yet another useful tool.
We have to acknowledge the fact to the people working for us that we have feelings also. You know, we're not as cold as we appear to be during the year. So we have to acknowledge the fact we're with you also. You know, we're only human. We got to get the job done. We push. And they think sometimes we have ice water in our blood, you know?
Still, it's unlikely that any worker will change his mind about management because of a party. Nor will management change its mind about the virtues and flaws of the various trades that work here.
The excavators and steel workers tend to be very tough individuals. You know, they're working in the elements. So after 20 years of working outside in the cold and the rain and everything else, they build a certain character. They're very tough individuals. The tin knockers, who are the people who put up the ductwork for the air conditioning, I classify them as prima donnas. They want everything perfect. The electricians are also very particular trade. They're also prima donnas. The elevator constructors who build the elevators in the building, they have their own clique, and they're usually very safety conscious. So, you know, justifiably so. They're in a shaft 600 feet high. You know, if you fall, you're gone. There's no room for error, and they're very sticky for safety for good reasons. But they have their own little clique, and they all pull for their own basket. Every single trade pulls for their own basket.
In the next 2 months, the pressure will increase on all of these men as HRH tries to keep up with the schedule. But for Worldwide Plaza's architect, the relentless pace of construction is also accompanied by a sense of loss.
It's frightening to see the final thing come together and being crafted by other hands than your own. And not everything is right. Things change constantly. Many of the materials that we specified are now different. Shop drawings came in. They could not fabricate, or it was too expensive to fabricate what we had detailed. And so we're constantly losing pieces of the project. And so there's a constant line of defense to keep what you can get, but you recognize right in the beginning that you're not going to be able to keep 100% of it. I've never been in a project in which you can. And that's a frustrating and slightly scary process to go through.
But Bill Zeckendorf sees it differently.
We lose perspective of what we're doing when we sit in the office, or we sit down for a conversation with partners, or we talk to bankers. I think the reality of what you're doing only comes home when you're actually able to go to the construction site, see that physically something is happening, that you are building. And if it's looking down to an excavation hole, or it's going up on a outside elevator, or whatever it is, being inside, seeing the physical side of it, is really, to me, the excitement of the business.
In February, Worldwide Plaza's steel skeleton reaches the 40th floor. Although it's still several hundred feet short of its final height, it already dominates the surrounding neighborhood. On top, the ironworkers ignore the bitter cold. Only a gale or a snowstorm could slow them down. The schedule calls for the last piece of steel to go up in about 3 months' time. Any major delay could cost the building's developers millions of dollars. Even a single extra day will mean $100,000 in interest payments alone. It's a risky business in more ways than one. Down on the street, a phone man relays instructions to the crane operator at the top of the building. This morning, 100 tons or more of columns and beams will be slowly hoisted to the ironworkers above. A mistake could be catastrophic, but the ironworkers aren't fazed. They understand the dangers and shrug them off.
No
they consider the ironworker a breed all of their own. You know, they're working in the heights, in the elements. It takes a certain type of person that's willing to do this. You know, there is danger from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Today, the ironworkers are filling in a corner of the building's frame. Because each column is 2 stories high, the team works on one 2-floor section at a time.
All your movement. Coming down low.
Each of the connections between the beams and columns has been designed to withstand both the vertical loads of weight, which push down upon it, and the horizontal loads of wind, which push against it. There's also about a 50% safety factor added in. It takes about an hour and a half to erect most of the northwest corner of the skyscraper. About the same time it takes the rest of us to finish a long lunch. Although everything's on schedule at the top of the building, it's a different story at the bottom, where the erection of the granite facade has been delayed for weeks. The building was designed with a brick exterior on the upper floors and a granite exterior on the lower floors. But because granite is so expensive and heavy, the architect's plan calls for a thin veneer of stone supported from behind by steel trusses, which are hidden from view. When the building opens, this is how the lower floors will look. HRH, the construction manager, has hired an experienced firm called Hunts Point to handle the stonework.
We contracted with Hunts Point, who was supposed to design panels, self-sustaining panels that are clipped onto the building with a truss, and onto the truss is the stone. This is all prefabricated panel. And he hired his own engineers to design the panels. And there was an engineer that he hired and was working away at it. And suddenly we realized that this engineer wasn't doing it correctly. Hunts Point realized that he wasn't doing it correctly. He was being lied to. We had no shop drawings, and a panic spill started.
But it isn't easy to have a showdown with Hunts Point and its owner, Agnello Migliori, a man who's a member of one of New York's most powerful crime families, and who is also, as it happens, distracted by some annoying legal problems.
To get rid of this gentleman now leads one to obviously some sort of a lawsuit for the services done, and obviously he would inflate the benefit of these things for his own benefit, which anybody else would do in that position too. Then I'd have to go out and look for another contractor. The problem there is that many contractors in New York, many groups are very close-knit, very tight. I might find that even though there's 2 or 3 others that might, I think, be able to do the job, would say, thank you, I'm too busy, only because they owe an allegiance to this guy.
After deciding to stick with Hunts Point, HRH tries to assess the damage to the schedule. At last count, it's 2.5 months behind. That means the lower floors might not be finished in time for their tenant, Ogilvy and Mather. If that happens, the owners will have to pay Ogilvy a late charge that could run into the millions, and that's just the beginning.
The stone contractor has to coordinate with the other trades that come in contact with his work. And if he doesn't keep up on schedule, the other contractors are also thrown off schedule. The windows can't be finalized until they know exactly how it's going to fit and marry with the details that the stone contractor has developed. They haven't been fully developed yet, therefore the window manufacturer is going to start claiming delays or some other reason for not being able, legitimately I think, that he can't complete his work until he gets the proper information.
As the pressure mounts, a contingent from Worldwide Plaza flies to Italy to check on the progress of the stonework, which Hunts Point is supervising here. The granite, as well as marble for the building's interior, is being prepared at a stone yard about 60 miles outside of Venice. Terry Soderberg represents the building's owners. The thought of further delays keeps him up at night. Ed Narbutis is the architect's representative. He wants to check on the quality of the stone and the workmanship. And Dominic Fonti, although he's happy to be back in his native country, needs to make sure there's enough stone to finish the job. After the truss fiasco, the men approach their mission with trepidation.
Now we are all desperate. The owner, the architect, HRH, everyone's desperate for Hunts Point in trying to complete the project on a timely fashion. Because we have made some commitments to the owner for enclosing the facade of the building for some tenant commitments which are made, which are valued at multi-million dollars.
Right now, we have no leverage at all on Hunts Point because we don't have a signed contract. Tomorrow, if we reject what they have put forward for either technical reason, aesthetic reason, veining, anything, and he says, okay, you want this? It's $1 million more. We have no choice. None, no choice at all, because we can't change contractors, we can't change suppliers. We're already $5, $8, maybe $9 million in the hole already. I mean, we are behind the 8 ball, and there's not a darn thing we can do.
The liability or the exposure of this will be really finalized tomorrow when we look at the stone.
Yeah, and that's going to be a real rude awakening.
I mean, obviously, if the stone is totally unacceptable to the three of us here, okay,
we got no problem.
We have a big problem.
We have a big problem.
We have a big problem.
Very big problem.
The next day, they drive out to the stone yard with a representative of Hunts Point.
You know, like in this area or more like that.
First, they take a look at samples of different types of interior marble for the lobbies, the arcade, and the washrooms.
Camperosa, Camperosa is what?
That's the first one.
Yes, that's the walls.
That's
correct?
the walls.
All
right, that's probably
you
what...
find that acceptable?
I find that acceptable. I find that acceptable.
Okay.
I think that's...
Well, as far as the Camperosa is concerned...
It certainly is. It's not sandblasted yet, and I think they mentioned that they're going to try to get a sandblast finish, but you can tell that once you do sandblast, it'll come out fine. So this is an acceptable range of stone.
Eduardo, this the front desk people will see.
But the quality and color of some of the samples are not at all what Ed Narbutis thought he and the other architects had specified.
Yeah. See, there's also, this has a lot more red in it. It's very red.
This is like
much too washed out.
The control samples, which the architect brought with him, did not match the slabs which they showed to us. And apparently, obviously, we have some complications there, contractual complications. Also, we have a complication that if we do switch to another stone, a more white stone, a more white marble, there's a cost implication. But putting cost aside, there's a time factor.
Even when the samples are approved, the group still has to make sure they're representative of the large slabs from which the building's marble will be cut. Stone yards have been known to take orders for one kind of stone and deliver another. But it's worth the risk. Italian stonemasons are generally considered masters of their craft. Centuries of experience and dependable equipment have made yards like this one a world center of the stone trade. The quarry where the building's marble comes from would not be unfamiliar to the builders of the Roman Senate more than 2,000 years ago. The next day, the group sees another inspiring sight. It's a mock-up of one of the building's 48 columns for the ground floor. The column is made of the same granite throughout, but some of it was polished to make it look darker, and the rest was flame-treated, burning away the outer layer to give it a rougher, lighter appearance.
This has made my morning. The first feeling when I looked at that column standing there, it sort of made yesterday's disappointment, because I was quite upset yesterday. That made this disappointment diminish somewhat. I think all of us are happy. The owner, the architects, we're all happy. We've had so many detail changes. We've had so many shop drawings back and forth. The architect has said, well, I haven't seen a completed set of shop drawings. I haven't seen this, I haven't seen that. So I was quite concerned that the quality was not going to be acceptable. But all of those fears were sort of dissipated this morning when we saw that column. It's quite impressive.
There is also optimism back in Manhattan. The bricks, which caused so much trouble in the fall, are finally at the site. At least the upper floors will be properly dressed, even if the lower floors aren't. The skyscraper's exterior will have an outer wall of brick and an inner wall of concrete blocks. The concrete blocks go up first. They're delivered to the masons as needed throughout the day.
The 8 inches and the 12 inches, you slug them all day, you're tired when you get home. The brick, you can lay 1,000 brick and you feel great. You lay 1,000 of these things, birth control blocks. You don't go home and make babies, you go home and sleep.
The inner wall is started in the corner and then built outward in a perfectly straight line that runs for some 200 feet. A mason qualified to begin the wall is called a cornerman.
Your cornerman is very important. You had a bad cornerman, you'll have a bad wall. Good cornerman, the guys in the middle, they go with that line, the line can't be wrong. If anybody gets blamed or gets fired, it's the guy that does the corner. He's a cornerman, I'm a cornerman, this gentleman right here is a cornerman.
We're all qualified to be called cornermen. All qualified.
But it's the outer wall of brick that the public sees, and what the bricklayers take most pride in. Each mason must constantly check his work with a level to make sure the wall is straight, both horizontally and vertically. Each floor's worth of bricks is supported by steel plates at the bottom. The bricks are also attached to the inner wall and a layer of insulation with steel connectors called strap anchors. With 1.25 million bricks, it's the biggest masonry job in New York, a city where almost all the other new skyscrapers are clad in glass and steel. So it's no surprise that the bricklayers love it.
I think the architect came from upstairs, believe me, because he's the guy really has a head on his shoulders. I'm in the business 25 years, and this is some of the best work I've seen.
By the spring, the construction of the building is at the halfway point. With the owners now spending millions of dollars a week, every new cost overrun hurts.
We're talking about $70,000.
Swallow and Cerami met, 6 months ago, 4 months ago?
Cerami
They battled
and
it out.
Swallow and Capistrano and all the others, what do they care? It's not their money, okay? It's $70,000, never mind.
It's becoming increasingly difficult to stick to the original budget, which was drawn up by HRH and the architects 2 years ago, before construction began.
Okay, I've never seen ductwork with straps 12 inches on center. I've never seen it in my life.
To Jack Schuster, HRH, the construction manager, or CM, is sometimes part of the problem instead of the solution.
I think that the CM sold a budget that was unrealistic and sold a time frame that was unrealistic. I think ultimately the cost will be realistic and the time frame will be realistic. But that's not going to stop me from screaming and tearing my hair about the costs or yelling and screaming that we're late, because we've made commitments both to the bank in terms of cost and to tenants in terms of completion that we are now not being able to meet.
Some of the items, once fully developed drawings came out, we realized, well, it's a little bit different. It's a little more complicated than we thought. So as a result, certain things became much more expensive. I mean, there have been a lot of changes to this project. They have not altered the appearance of the building in one iota, in my mind. Yes, we have made some mistakes. I mean, we're all humans, okay? We may have forgotten one or two items which we should have included. Okay, well, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. But to try to put the entire cost overrun at HOH's feet is totally incorrect, and there's no basis for it.
The worst problem remains the trusses for the granite facade. The assembly is taking place in New Jersey. The granite, which was cut and polished in Italy, is really only a veneer 1.5 inches thick, so it must be attached to a backing of precast concrete and mounted on a steel frame. But this work should have been completed by Hunts Point more than 2 months ago. When the first trusses finally arrive at the site in late April, there's more bad news. They aren't finished.
We've always envisioned, and I think everybody on the team, from HRH, us, and the way that shop drawings have been coming through, we envisioned a panel that was fabricated under a more controlled environment of a shop that was off-site someplace. Now, the panels that are arriving have maybe half the stone panels and really none of the other components that make up the panel that makes up the exterior wall, such as the insulation or the vapor barrier or the flashing. Obviously, it's difficult to maintain the quality control because now you're erecting on the side of a building on scaffolding instead of on the ground. So that kind of causes some concern on our part, and I'm sure on HRH's part, about whether they can get all the components to work, properly when it's all going together.
Now that the erection of the trusses is also going slower than expected, there's little chance that Worldwide Plaza's developers will escape a huge late charge. But who's going to tell Bill Zeckendorf that he's about to lose a small fortune?
The people who work for him, his son, Terry, Jack, knew everything all the way up. No one likes to admit that they didn't tell him. I probably should have told him. However, you feel that you don't like to go over the heads of the representatives of the people, and Mr. Zeckendorf is, in general, not a person who likes to be bothered. I think he would have wanted to be bothered on something as big as we're talking about here. Did his people know about what was going on? Absolutely.
Anyway, how are we doing on scheduling?
Okay, 2 through 5, it's going to be a major problem. No matter what we do, we're working weekends. Like this weekend, we got the city to allow 2 12-hour shifts.
So what does this mean?
Well, there's not enough money or hours or anything we can throw at it to get 2 through 5 totally enclosed per the lease.
What's that going to do to our Ogilvy situation?
We have a force majeure item which we can claim, which will stand up. It goes back to what Jack raised a month ago, is that we may try to make a 2-stage deal with Ogilvy. It all falls back on what commitments they have made to their existing landlord if this option penalty kicks in.
It's just terrible. Just terrible.
Bill, we got hurt last week. The city wouldn't let us work.
Yeah, but the problem goes way back. It doesn't start last week.
Oh, no, the problem goes way back. You're right. The problem, I think we may have been overly optimistic on the schedule, and the problem goes way back.
How much will this delay the Ogilvy?
Let's say it's the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor. Optimistically, it's 3 weeks. Pessimistically or realistically, as Jack looks at it, it's more like 5 to 6 weeks. Once the granite trusses are hung, we could work around the clock with the sheetrock and fin tube guys, but there's no way to make a July 1 date physically. We'll be very close.
And what are the penalties to us?
Our penalty would be from January 1st going out, the differential between their holdover rent and the rent they'd be paying us. That penalty kicks in.
So what's that going to cost us in dollars?
60 divided by 12, you're looking at $1.8 million.
think if we can amicably do it, Bill, why don't we start thinking now in terms of putting together a force majeure situation? Because we never really thought about up until now.
Jack, it's not going to work.
It's not going to work?
No, it's just going to, we just can't do this. How do we ever fall so far behind this?
Despite the gloom at Zeckendorf headquarters, back at the site, the accomplishments of HRH and the rest of the project team are readily apparent. But with the lower floors still not enclosed, there is an angry tenant to contend with. And with another year of construction remaining, the team is facing complicated work on the stone facade and the roof. For Bill Zeckendorf, the headaches are far from over. By May, Worldwide Plaza has grown almost to its full height. A year after the first steel column was hoisted into place, the 47-story skyscraper towers over its nearest neighbors. Harry Wiedmeyer is Worldwide Plaza's safety inspector. His job is to keep everyone alive. Each day, he takes a walk through the building to check on potential hazards.
I'm walking a project. This is what I would consider, a safety person would consider to be a rough floor. And a rough floor is considered to be an ironworker's floor. At that time, what I'd be looking for an ironworker protection would be one, floor openings. That all floor openings be covered. We have a shaft here that's open and it can drop down several floors. Our concern is that there's some type of barricading with a top rail, a mid rail, and a toe board. It will hold up to 200 pounds in either direction except upright. As part of my tour, I also will look at all shaftways, perimeters for protection. On a daily tour, it's always good to consider and look around and have eyes open for everybody. This is something that you don't see that often, but it does happen. These are 4x4s. We would like to take them, always push them to the side.
A piece of wood can be a deadly object when it falls 47 floors. Recently, a pedestrian was decapitated by wood falling off another HRH building. These safety nets are meant to protect pedestrians from all kinds of debris. But today, a piece of brick made it through and dented a passing car. Perhaps because of the danger, the ironworkers are an especially tight-knit group. They don't work for just one company, but go from job to job. About 40 of the ironworkers at Worldwide Plaza are Mohawk Indians. Their fathers and their grandfathers worked on the high steel before them, the profession handed down through the generations. Pete Marquis is a Mohawk from Canada.
Back home, we got bridges that been built by our forefathers, and when we were kids there, we used to go play on there. That was like the start, So then from there, you come to this, and you keep going till you get old and gray, and it's time to retire and stay home and show other kids there what's happening,
It's a 6-hour drive from the site to the Kanawaki Reservation just outside Montreal. Marquis and his father, who also works at Worldwide Plaza, make the trip every weekend to see their family. Marquis' children get an early education in climbing, but they'll have to be 21 and go through a training program before they can join their father.
Oh, well, just right here, I don't worry, but if they went to the big city on the real job, 50 stories up, I'd really be worried.
That's the way to do it in the big job.
You don't have to go far to see why the families worry. The grave markers of men who died on the job are made of steel. Tomorrow, Marquis and his father will head back to New York. They'll drive all night to be at the site by 8 in the morning. At the bottom of the building, work is still going slowly. But now, new complications up on the roof are threatening even more delays. The roof's design calls for copper cladding, with a glass pyramid at the top, housing a beacon that will light up the skyline. Artie Nussbaum proposed what he thought was an economical way to construct the roof using prefabricated panels.
We felt we could make these copper panels up in a factory and then hoist them to the top of the building with the derrick, with the FAFCO, and leave them on the floor and have the contractor who made the panels install them then on the steel, which had already been prepared to receive these panels. By doing that, we have only one trade working from the floor, putting in all the work with everything prefabricated, a minimum of field work, instead of the 4 trades and the big scaffolding.
There was also a plan to use the space under the roof for the air conditioning and elevator systems. This too was a cost-saving measure.
The top of the building, the hollow part underneath the mansard, had been almost completely decorative. And with our suggestion, we were able to get them to use the areas, the volume under the mansard for various mechanical services, which had been located lower down in the building, fill up the mansard with mechanical services, able to get them, therefore, to cut off a story off the building.
When the panels arrive at the site in September, everyone looks forward to a fast and efficient job. These copper rings, which will form the roof's circular windows, will go in last when everything else is in place. Artie Nussbaum's plan was to lift the pieces to the top floor by elevator, then hoist them into place on the roof frame with a derrick. But the frame at this height isn't strong enough to support a derrick. And that's not all. The mechanical systems are supposed to go under the roof, but the flooring was designed when everyone thought this space would be empty, so the flooring isn't strong enough either.
And now we're faced with a roofing framing, structural steel framing, so light in capacity that I'm even told now that I have to reinforce the steel framing to land my cooling towers on top, because the system is designed to have concrete and steel acting together. And since I cannot be pouring concrete at this stage prior to landing cooling towers, I have to reinforce my structural steel. We're talking easily over $100,000, easily, to reinforce something up there, which could have been bought for nothing at the time of the contract, for nothing. So Artie's ideas and concepts were excellent, but unfortunately, we don't have the system, the structural system, to make it work.
After another painful delay, the roof assembly finally begins with the mullions, the long rectangular tubes that will form the seams between the copper panels. Each mullion is bolted to the roof frame and spot welded. Because there's no derrick, the panels had to be hoisted up by hand, piece by piece. Then they're screwed into the mullions and caulked, forming a watertight seal. Among the last pieces to go up are the circular frames for the huge dormer windows. It will take only a few years in the New York air before the bright copper tarnishes to its final shade of rich green. In November, workmen prepare to lift the last piece of the roof. It's a small metal pyramid that will crown the building.
Okay.
As they drill bolt holes for the pyramid's base, none of the men wears a safety harness, which might constrict their movements. Each side of the pyramid will have an aircraft warning light. A small door provides access for the lucky man who will change the bulbs. It's as high as Worldwide Plaza will go. 770 feet above Manhattan. In December, the building's largest tenant, Ogilvy & Mather, celebrates the impending move to Worldwide Plaza during its annual Christmas breakfast.
In the third part of 88, I thank the company for great...
But just as the Ogilvy crowd is getting in the holiday spirit, across town, Felix Germano is stepping up the pressure.
Do it and then take it down.
Third time this was done, it was up and down again. This is the second time. Put it up and go take it down again.
It gets crazy about now because everything starts to come together, and you could see it coming together. The momentum builds up. You know, even the guys feel good about it because they walk around and they see what's happening also. So it comes to a point they're tired of the place also. They want to get out of here. Now everybody wants to finish up, get paid, see how beautiful it is, and get on to the next one. How many guys are leaving on a storefront detail on this thing?
According to the schedule set last year, Ogilvy was supposed to be here by now, but it will take months more to finish the job. And for every week that goes by, the developers will lose $300,000 in rent, not to mention late charges and interest fees.
All right, Kip, thanks.
Meanwhile, Dominic Fonte is worrying about a long series of city inspections. If the building doesn't pass all of them, it can't get a certificate of occupancy. And without a certificate, it can't open.
As far as completion of the building at TCO, right now we're in the stage of going through the inspection of several different agencies in the city of New York. We have the building department, we have the fire department, the plumbing department. The fire department has two different agencies which inspect. One is the electrical division and the other one is the actual battalion chief who is responsible for this area. Is actually going to be walking the building. And this is all happening this month.
Just before Christmas, Fonte's worst fears are realized. A water pipe upstairs is broken, ruining the alarm system, which is monitored in the lobby.
Right now we're going into trouble. Where is Jerry? Jerry's up in the rack room.
Components of the alarms on many of the floors will have to be taken apart and dried, and their computer chips reprogrammed. Needless to say, the system fails the inspection.
This has really spoiled my week. It never fails that every year around Christmas time, around December, we always have a crisis of some other type or one another.
It will take 2 more months before Worldwide Plaza gets her certificate of occupancy. It's going to be a long winter.
Everybody else who comes up here looks out at the view rather than looks at the building. It's great.
But in spite of all the frustration, there are still moments of great satisfaction, especially for David Childs.
It's going down into the... For an architect, it's tough to go back to a building when it's complete because you see all the errors, all the things that are not done right. And it's true for the contractors and the owner. And you have to keep remembering that nobody else notices those things. It could always be done, something to be done just a little bit differently. But given overall, I'm very pleased with this building. I'm proud of it. It's exhilarating. It's done. It's here. It's happened.
Finally, on May 15th, the building officially opens and Ogilvy & Mather moves in. Worldwide Plaza is finished at last. Well, almost.
Let's see. Hi, am I an H or am I a W? I'm Henry Whitmore.
And you should be an H.
Oh,
For
good.
Alice Henry Whitmore, an Ogilvy copywriter, the building takes a little bit of getting used to.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness. Food. I've never seen so much red carpet in my life. Hi, Alice.
Hi, Alice.
How are you? Goodness. Veronica. Hey, Annie, I'm lost. I should have gone that way. It's going to be easier to go back. It's probably easier to apply for a new job. Ah! There's my boss! There's Tom, I was lost!
A happy ending for one tenant. But downstairs in the lobby, an Ogilvy executive is far from pleased.
We expected to be in February. Understanding the building scenes in New York, we thought that would mean March or April. It's now May, and we are a little bit disappointed that it's not totally finished.
Ogilvy's displeasure about the state of the building is quickly made known. But even worse, from Bill Zeckendorf's standpoint, is the possibility that the work won't be finished in time for another tenant to move in.
When I went through the building yesterday, because we had heard some reports, and I was very surprised that the sidewalk was not in on 49th Street. And I found out really for the first time the severity of the problem on the west lobby. And I had to, that's for the stonework, for both the floor and the walls. We have another tenant moving in June or July, and that's Polygram, part of North American Phillips. And I became very concerned that we're not going to make the date. And so I got hold of the president of HRH and the chairman of HRH, and it was a problem that had been festering for a long time. And I think people tend to feel they can solve those problems without be too deeply involved in it. But having seen it for myself, I got very concerned and started pushing the panic buttons.
With so many delays and cost overruns, Worldwide Plaza had better keep its tenants happy and attract some new ones soon. It's the only way to make a profit. And profit is ultimately what a skyscraper is all about.
Of all the, 3-4 years of work, what it comes down to are pieces of paper, numbers, internal rate of return, the net present value, discounted cash flows. We want to build quality. We want to build something that is going to be a statement. But if you can't do that and still have it financeable and make a return, then why are we doing it? I'm not doing it for the fun of it. I don't think Bill is. I don't think the other partners are. And I don't think the lenders who are lending, they aren't doing it for the fun of it. So we can cut through all the philosophical stuff of the architects, the planners, the sociological statements that some of the partners have made about we're saving or we're enhancing the community life and all this sort of stuff. That's all true. But what it boils down to is internal rate of return.
The last to leave will be Dominic Fonte, finishing the job and reflecting on how it has changed him.
3 years have gone by, so 3 years you change. Even under normal circumstances, you change it. And especially when you are always in a frying pan, you tend to change. I have less tolerance for incompetence because what invariably happens is that even when someone else doesn't do what they're supposed to do, I'm the guy responsible. And I'm the guy that they look to make sure things are done. And I can never use the excuse, well, I assigned Joe Smith to the job. That's no excuse. It's Dominic Fonte who's supposed to be doing the job, quotes. Okay? So I'm a little more of a pain with my people than I was 3 years ago.
Of all the members of the team, Artie Nussbaum may have the most regrets about the experience.
Building a building is a little bit like a campaign in a war. You win some positions easily, and some are a little harder to overcome. Some were a little harder, I think. My main problem really is the feeling of the owner that we deserted him. I find that unbelievable position on his part, because we broke our ass, and I really feel we did a good job, and I take it very personally that he does not understand who are the guys with the white hats and who are the guys with the black hats. And I think I'm a white hatter.
But even with the pain, there will always be the pleasure.
The satisfaction that I've received from doing a project of this magnitude is the knowledge that after all of the aggravation, after all of the headaches and the screaming and the yelling and the cursing and the politics involved from everybody, from every angle, is that it is a successful project. It's just about fully rented except for 5 floors. And pretty soon everybody's going to forget the aggravation. Once everything is, all the lights are on and everybody's walking in and out and everybody's enjoying themselves and working in a beautiful environment, everybody will forget for the moment when they look at the building and say, it's beautiful.
Funding for NOVA is provided by Lockheed, a bold new force in systems engineering, management, and technology services for defense, space, and industry. And Johnson & Johnson, the signature recognized around the world for commitment to quality healthcare products for the entire family. Major funding for NOVA is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.